He said I was his entire world. Watched me fall apart without flinching. And that's when I realized I was just the tragedy in his love story. But then, I took the pen and wrote his ending in red. He said I was his whole life. And when you've spent most of your own life feeling like a burden, like an afterthought, like nothing more than a placeholder in other people's stories, hearing those words feels like being handed the sun after living in darkness. I didn't just believe him. I clung to him like he was oxygen, like he was the only thing keeping me from slipping beneath the surface again. Maybe it's pathetic to say that. Maybe it makes me look weak. But if you've ever been truly broken, not bruised, not sad, but shattered, then you know. You know how fast hope becomes a drug. And how someone simply whispering, "I choose you," can become the one thing keeping your feet on the ground. When Aiden walked into my life, I wasn't surviving. I was dissolving. I had just come out of a 2-year relationship with a man who convinced me that love looked like silence, like cold shoulders and walking on eggshells. I had lost weight from the stress. My skin was dull, my eyes hollow, my laughter non-existent. My friends said I was different, like a ghost of who I used to be. But what they didn't understand was that heartbreak doesn't always come with screams. Sometimes, it's quiet. It wears a smile. And it eats you from the inside out. I met Aiden 6 months after that relationship ended. I was still raw. Still afraid. Still waking up in the middle of the night with a tight chest and no reason to breathe. I had stopped trusting people, not just lovers, but friends, family, even myself. I didn't believe I deserved anything good. I didn't believe I'd ever be seen as enough. And then he came along. Aiden didn't just walk into my life. He studied it. He studied me. We met in the kind of coffee shop that plays soft jazz in the background and always smells like cinnamon. I was sitting by the window, reading a book I wasn't even interested in, trying to look put together while internally spiraling about being alone again on a Saturday night. He asked if he could share the table. I barely looked up, just nodded and went back to pretending to read. Then he said, "That book changed my life." I glanced up. He smiled. Softly. Not the kind of smile that screams confidence or flirtation, but one that whispered, "I get it." "That's so?" I asked, more out of politeness than interest. He nodded. Especially the part where she realizes she kept giving pieces of herself to men who never even knew her favorite song. I stared. He had quoted the exact chapter I had just read before coming in. Word for word. I didn't know if it was a coincidence, fate, or some elaborate pickup line, but in that moment, something cracked open in me. We talked for 2 hours that night. About books. About grief. About how empty it feels to be surrounded by people who don't really see you. He told me he lost his mom to cancer the year before. That he knew what it was like to feel unanchored, to wake up and forget what joy feels like. And he listened. Not the way most men listen, where they're just waiting to speak. No, he listened with his whole body. Leaning in. Eyes steady. Hands still. Like my words mattered. By the end of the night, he said, "I know this sounds insane, but it feels like I've known you forever." I smiled. Not because I believed him, but because I wanted to. I wanted it so badly, I ignored the little voice that whispered, "It's too soon." We started seeing each other every day after that. He sent good morning texts before I opened my eyes. Showed up at my job with my favorite drink. Memorized my routines, my moods, even the way I like my pasta. He didn't make grand gestures. He made consistent ones. When I told him about my ex, about the nights I spent crying on the bathroom floor, he didn't flinch. He held me tighter. When I told him I didn't know how to trust again, he said, "That's okay. I'll earn it, day by day." And he did. Or at least, he made me think he did. That's the thing about men like Aiden. They don't come in looking like villains. They don't storm into your life screaming danger. They tiptoe in with kind words, warm arms, and promises you've been desperate to hear. He healed me. Or more accurately, he gave me the illusion of healing. He told me I was safe. He told me I was home. He told me I was his whole life. And I gave him mine in return. Full length vertical bar, emotional breakdown, vertical bar, rising betrayal. He told me I was his whole life. But when I started falling apart, he just watched. He didn't hold me. He didn't fight for me. He didn't reach for me the way I used to reach for him in the middle of those long, sleepless nights when the nightmares crept in and I couldn't breathe. He just stood there, still, cold, distant, like watching someone burn and refusing to pour water, even when the bucket is right beside him. It didn't happen overnight. In fact, it was so gradual that at first, I thought I was the one changing. It started with little things, the delayed replies, the distracted eyes during conversations. The way he'd say, "I'm just tired," or "I've got a lot on my mind," every time I asked if he was okay. His hand used to reach for mine under the table, gently curling our fingers together like we were a secret only the universe knew. Now, he barely looked up from his phone. But the worst part, I still tried. I tried to be understanding, patient, loving. I told myself people have ups and downs. That maybe it was stress, work, life, anything but the truth clawing at the back of my throat. Because admitting he was changing meant admitting that I was being abandoned again. One night, I made his favorite dinner, lemon garlic pasta, with extra parmesan the way he liked it. I lit candles. I wore the blue dress he once said made me look like the ocean. I even played our playlist in the background, the one we made during our first road trip, when everything still felt like magic. He came home 2 hours late. Didn't kiss me. Didn't compliment the dress. Just walked past me like I was furniture. "You didn't have to cook," he said flatly, putting his keys down. I stood there, frozen. The candles flickered between us like they were ashamed. "I wanted to," I said quietly. "I missed you." He looked at me, but not into me. Like I was a stranger he had to pretend to recognize. "I'm tired, babe," he sighed. "Can we not do this tonight?" "Do what?" "Love each other? Talk? Pretend we're still us?" He sat on the couch and turned on the TV. Dinner sat untouched. I sat untouched. And that's when the spiral began. I stopped trying to fix my hair in the mornings. Stopped waiting up for him. Stopped texting first, not out of pride, but because I couldn't bear to see the read notification with no reply. But the pain didn't just come from what he didn't do. It came from the way he started making me feel like I was the problem. If I cried, I was being too sensitive. If I questioned him, I was being paranoid. If I begged for reassurance, I was being needy. He turned my desperation into ammunition, my vulnerability into weakness, my love into something shameful. And worst of all, he never yelled, never hit, never called me names. No, his weapon was silence, disinterest, a quiet withdrawal that made me question my own worth every single day. I began to shrink myself. Stop talking about my day because he wasn't listening anyway. Stop dressing up because compliments stopped coming. Stop smiling because what was the point? It was like dating a ghost. Except ghosts don't gaslight you into believing they're still there. I remember one night, I woke up at 3 a.m., shaking from a nightmare. I reached out for him, whispering, "Aiden." He didn't even flinch. Just turned to the other side. That's when I knew. He saw me drowning and chose not to save me. Not because he couldn't, but because he didn't want to. Because somehow, watching me unravel made him feel powerful. And in that moment, that one horrifying moment under the weight of his silence, I realized something I had refused to see all along. I wasn't his whole life. I was his pastime, his ego boost, his project. And now that the game wasn't fun anymore, he was ready to let the pieces fall. But what he didn't know was this. He might have watched me fall apart, but he forgot that even shattered glass still cuts. Betrayal revealed vertical bar, emotional shift, vertical bar, dark awakening. The moment it hit me, the exact second the truth finally crashed through the walls of my denial. It didn't come with a bang. It wasn't some dramatic argument or confession. It was a single glance. From across the room. He was laughing, not just smiling, not the empty smirk he gave me when I asked about his day. No, this was full body, eyes crinkling, carefree laughter. The kind I hadn't seen in months. And the worst part? It wasn't for me. It was for her. Her name was Layla. His coworker. The one he swore was just a friend. The one he mentioned in passing every now and then. The one he texted late-night project updates to while I lay in bed wondering what part of him I'd lost this time. I never liked her. Not because I was jealous, but because I recognized her. Because once upon a time, I was her. The girl he looked at like a mystery. The girl he leaned toward during conversations. The girl he couldn't stop smiling around. It wasn't the flirting that broke me. It was the familiarity. The recycled expressions. The copy-pasted charm. I wasn't special. I was just next. He had a pattern. I just hadn't realized I was part of it. When I walked over and stood beside him, he barely acknowledged me. Layla smiled politely. Too politely. He introduced me like I was a distant relative. "This is Ava," he said. No warmth. No pride. Just words, cold and obligatory. I forced a smile. I shook her hand. And in her eyes, I saw pity. Not jealousy. Not competition. Pity. That was the moment it all clicked. He wasn't distant because he was stressed. He was distant because he was done. He was done with the version of me he once pretended to worship. And now, like a bored player mid-game, he was already reaching for the next shiny object. All that talk about soulmates. All those nights he held me like I was his world. Every "I love you" whispered into my skin. It wasn't real. It was strategy. He had played the game well. Got me to fall. Got me to trust. Got me to pour every last drop of myself into him. Until I had nothing left to give. And now? He was bored. The way children get bored of toys they once cried for. I went home that night in silence. He didn't come with me. Said he had more work to finish. I didn't ask questions. Didn't cry. Didn't plead. Instead, I stood in the bathroom staring at myself in the mirror for what felt like hours. I didn't recognize the woman staring back. This wasn't me. Not the real me. The real me had fire. Had boundaries. Had dreams. This version? She was hollow. Pale. A vessel of everything he drained and discarded. I wanted to scream. I wanted to destroy something. But instead, I picked up my phone. And I started scrolling. Through texts. Photos. Memories. And I saw it, all of it, with new eyes. The manipulation. The subtle shifts. The power imbalance. The way he always had me needing him more. The way he disappeared when I was at my weakest, only to come back when I was strong again, like he couldn't bear to see me whole. He didn't love me. He used me. For comfort. For control. For ego. And I gave him everything. My heart. My time. My healing. I was just another level in his game. Another soul to conquer. Another chapter in a story where he always had to be the hero. Even if he had to break the damsel to feel that way. But what he forgot is that some girls don't stay broken. Some girls remember exactly how to fight. And when we do, we don't just end the game. We burn the whole board. Revenge begins vertical bar, the trap vertical bar cold power. They say revenge is best served cold. But mine? Mine was calculated. Precise. Chilled to the marrow and sharpened like a blade. Because when you've been shattered into dust, when you've begged someone to love you and they watched you drown without blinking, you don't want revenge to be loud. You want it to scar. That night after I realized everything, who he really was, what I really was to him. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I planned. Not out of hate, but out of clarity. Because I wasn't his victim anymore. I was about to become his karma. Phase 1. Pretend to be the same girl he broke. I didn't confront him. I didn't accuse him. I didn't even change the way I looked at him. That would have tipped him off. Instead, I smiled a little softer. Let him believe he still had me. That his spell still worked. Because nothing terrifies a manipulator more than thinking they still have control while you quietly take it back. I let him think I was fragile. That I was blind. That he could keep playing his game and I'd keep dancing to his rules. But inside, I was already reprogramming the board. Phase 2. Collect the evidence. You want to destroy a man like Aiden? You don't go after his heart. He never had one. You go after his ego. His reputation. His illusion. He built himself like a brand, charming, trustworthy, successful. People believed in him. Women adored him. His colleagues respected him. So I made it my mission to dismantle that mask, piece by piece. I started watching him closely. The lies he told Layla. The ones he told me. The patterns. The manipulation. The backup girls he kept, just in case. I wasn't snooping. I was building a case. I created backups of his secret messages, screenshots of his flirty texts, recordings of late-night calls when he thought I was asleep. And every time he gaslit me, told me I was imagining things, I smiled. Because I knew. I knew exactly how I'd use it. Phase 3. Set the stage. 3 months into the act, I hosted a dinner party. Just a small one. His friends. A few of mine. Layla too. He didn't know I'd invited her. Didn't know I'd invited her boyfriend either. Didn't know I'd printed out every text he'd ever sent her and folded them into neat little napkin envelopes. As the night wore on, wine flowed. Conversations buzzed. And then, I smiled sweetly, stood up, and said, "Before dessert, I have a little surprise. A game." Since Aiden loves games. I walked to the center of the room, held up a red folder, and said 4 words. "Let's play Truth Bomb." I opened the folder and began reading. One by one. Text messages. Call logs. The just friends conversations. The ones where he called Layla baby while I slept in the next room. The room fell silent. Faces drained. Layla stood frozen. Her boyfriend's fists clenched. "Aiden?" He went pale. Then red. Then pale again. He stammered. Denied. Yelled. But it was too late. Because I hadn't just invited people. I had also live-streamed it to a private link. One that every client, coworker, and friend of his received. He wanted to play with hearts? I exposed his deck of lies. He destroyed me in silence. I ended him with the truth. Phase 4. Walk away. On my terms. The fallout was instant. Layla left him that night. Her boyfriend nearly broke his jaw. His clients dropped him. His job investigated him. His so-called friends? Gone. He tried to call me after. Sent voice notes. Emails. Showed up at my door. "Let's talk. You misunderstood. Please don't ruin me." I just looked at him the way he used to look at me when I begged for his love. Cold. Empty. And moved. "No," I said, voice calm. "This is what it feels like to fall and be left alone." He asked why. Why I'd go so far. Why I'd ruin him. I smiled. Because he taught me how. And I don't like losing. He thought I was just a broken girl with a bleeding heart. He didn't realize that when a girl like me breaks, she doesn't just shatter. She sharpens. He lost everything. His job. His image. His women. His power. And for a while, that felt like enough. For a while, I thought exposing him was the end of the story. But then, I saw him again. It was 6 months later. I was at a bookstore, quiet, peaceful, flipping through poetry. Healing, finally. Breathing, finally. And there he was. Aiden. Alone. Thinner. Tired. Sunken eyes and the same fake smile he used to wear when trying to pretend he still had control. He froze when he saw me, like a ghost had walked in. "Ava," he said, almost whispering. "You look good." I just nodded. No warmth. No anger either. Just silence. He looked desperate, the kind of desperation I used to wear on my face. The kind he ignored. "I've been in therapy," he offered. "I'm trying to be better." I didn't say anything, because I knew better now. Better than to fall for confessions made only after consequences arrive. But then he said something that stayed with me. "I think about you every day. Not because of what you did, but because I didn't realize what I lost until it was too late." That should have meant something. It didn't. Because he hadn't lost me when I walked away. He lost me the moment he watched me cry, and chose not to care. What happened after that? I moved on. Slowly. Carefully. Started rebuilding my life. My art. My peace. But something inside me had shifted permanently. Not bitterness. Not rage. Just awareness. Awareness that love isn't proven by how someone treats you when you're glowing, but by how they hold you when you're bleeding. And he was never holding me. He was studying me, looking for cracks to crawl into, weaknesses to exploit. He didn't want to love me. He wanted to own me. But I was never his to own. And then came the twist. You'd think the story ends there, with me rising, him falling, balance restored. But no. This is cold revenge. The kind that keeps burning long after the fire's gone out. A year later, I got a letter. Handwritten. No return address. Inside was a photo. Aiden. Sitting alone in a cheap hotel room. Bottles around him. Bags under his eyes. Hollow. Scrawled in ink beneath the photo were just 3 words. "Do you win?" No signature. No explanation. I stared at that photo for hours. And in the quiet of my apartment, holding that frozen moment in my hands, I whispered to myself, no, I didn't win. Because when someone teaches you how cruel love can be, you don't win by watching them suffer. You win by making sure no one ever gets to do to you what they did. You win by healing so much that their name tastes like nothing. You win by never playing the game again. Final closing line haunting and complete. He thought I was just another piece in his game. But I was the final move. And now, he'll spend the rest of his life losing to the silence I left behind.